everyone, it's Sarah and welcome to my crochet channel. Now today's video I'm going to show you how to crochet a Christmas tree shaped hot pad or pot holder. And the really cool thing about this is you can leave it blank for a cabin or rustic fill, or you can add some decorative buttons or whatever you want. You could crochet circles and make little decorations. You could make some garland, go back and forth, however that you want to do it. I just added some little ornaments and buttons that I had on hand to mine. The other thing you can do with this is make it into a stuffie. And that's because it's two thicknesses, a front and a back, and then we stitch them together. You could always stuff it, and it would be a fun little stuffy pillow to have around for the holidays for the kiddos or even the adults to play with. Now you can find this free crochet pattern on my blog, and as always, I'll put that blog link down in the notes underneath this video. Let's talk yarn first. If you're going to be using this Christmas tree shaped hot pad as an actual hot pad, meaning you're going to use it for putting a hot pot on it or maybe a casserole dish out of the oven, you're going to want to use a cotton or cotton blend. I'm going to be using these as decorations that are going to be hanging up. I'm not going to actually use them as a hot pad. And so I'm going to be using acrylic yarn. This project can be done with any medium weight number 4 yarn that you want. Just keep in mind what you're going to use the hot pad for. The yarn that I'm using is called Premier Sweet Roll, and the color is Wasabi Pop. And I had this left over from a previous project, so I thought it would be perfect for my Christmas trees. Now, if you want to decorate it, I just collected some of my Christmas different baubles and buttons, and I decided since it's a decoration, I'm not going to sew them on. And so I just used a little bit of this E6000 and glued them on. I left the bottoms of the lights unattached so they can sort of stick out. I glued everything else on, but if you're just going to use buttons, you can sew them on if you want to. If you're going to make this as a little stuffy, you're going to need a little bit of stuffing, not very much, and I just have some polyester fiber fill here to show you how you can make that into a little stuffy. And I think it would be really cute to make it as a little stuffy and maybe put a happy face or a smiley face on it so it could be a happy Christmas tree. So there's lots of options here for this pattern. We are going to be stitching with our H hook, which is a 5.0 millimeter crochet hook. You'll need your scissors, of course, and then you'll need a needle to weave in those ends. We're going to begin by starting at the top of our Christmas tree and working our way down. And you'll need to make 2 of these in order to make our hot pad or even stuffy. We're going to begin with our slip knot, and we're going to chain 4 chains. Now we're going to place 4 double crochets in the 4th chain from the hook. Yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through the first 2, yarn over, and go through the second 2. All right, so I need to place 3 more in that same chain. I stitched 4 double crochets and my chain 3 counted as 1 double crochet. I'm going to go ahead and chain 3. And so that's the point of the top of our Christmas tree. 5 double crochets. Our chain 3 counts as 1 double crochet, and we're going to stitch 2 double crochets in the same stitch as our chain. So 1 and 2. Now we're going to stitch 1 double crochet in the next 3. 1, 2 and 3. Then we're going to stitch 2 double crochets in this last stitch, which is that chain 3 that counted as our first double crochet. So 1 and 2. And we'll go ahead and chain 3 here. Alright, so we stitched 2 in the same stitch as our chain 3, so that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, because we stitched 2 in the last double crochet. So we have 8 double crochets for row 2. Alright, for row 3, we're only going to stitch 1 double crochet in the same stitch as our chain 3. Then we'll stitch 1 double crochet in each of those double crochets across, and then when we get to our last double crochet, we're going to stitch 2 double crochets in this last stitch, which is the chain 3 that counted as 1 double crochet. There we go. And we'll go ahead and chain 3. And so now we have 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Because we had 8 and we increased by 1 at the beginning and end of this row. So row 3 has 10 double crochets. All right, row 4, we're basically just going to repeat what we did on row 3. Our chain 3 counts as our first, and then we're going to double crochet in the same stitch as our chain 3. Then we'll stitch 1 double crochet in each of the double crochets across, and then we'll stitch 2 double crochets in the last stitch. All right, I'm to my last stitch, and I'm going to stitch 2 double crochets, and this brings us to 12 double crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now, we're not going to chain 3 on this one, we're just going to chain 1. All right, let's do row 5. We chained 1, it does not count as a stitch. We're going to slip stitch in the first 2 stitches. So we'll go in, pull up a loop, pull that loop through the hook, the loop on our hook, and repeat. And we'll do this in the next stitch, and then we'll chain 3. 1, 2, 3, and this counts as 1 double crochet, and then we're going to stitch 2 double crochets in this same stitch. So we slip stitched, chained 3, and 2 double crochets in that same stitch. Now we're going to stitch 1 double crochet in the next 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now the next stitch, we're going to stitch 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3. We'll go ahead and chain 3, and we'll leave these last 2 stitches unworked. So we slip stitched in the first 2 stitches, and then in the next stitch we slip stitched, chain 3, and 2 double crochets. Then we stitched 1 double crochet in the next 6, and then in the next stitch we stitched 3 double crochets. So we have 12 double crochets with the 2 slip stitches and 2 stitches over here unworked. All right, let's do row 6. We chained 3, which counts as our first double crochet. We're going to stitch a double crochet in the same stitch as our chain 3, and then we'll stitch 1 double crochet in each of those double crochets across until we reach that last double crochet. And then we'll stitch 2 double crochets in that last double crochet. Alrighty, so now I'm to the last stitch, and I'm going to stitch 2 double crochets. And we'll go ahead and chain 3. Alright, so now, turn it this way. We stitch 2 at the beginning and 2 at the end, so we have 14 double crochets. So now for row 7 and row 8, we're basically going to repeat what we did for row 6. We'll stitch 2 at the beginning, 1 in each in the middle, and 2 at the end of the next 2 rows. Chain 3 counts as our first, 1 double crochet in the same stitch, 1 double crochet in each, double crochet across, 2 double crochets in the last stitch, and repeat for row 7 and row 8. I've completed row 7 and row 8. Row 7 you have 16 double crochets, and row 8 you have 18. We did 2 at the beginning and end, so that it increased by 1 on each end. After your last double crochet on row 8, we're going to chain 1. So for row 9, we're going to do a similar technique that we did up here. We chained 1. We're going to stitch a slip stitch in the first 2 stitches. Then in the next stitch, we're going to stitch a slip stitch, chain 3 that counts as a double crochet, and 2 more double crochets, 1 and 2. Now we're going to stitch 1 double crochet in the next 12 double crochets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, whoopsie, get in there, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And that leaves us with 3 stitches. And in the next stitch, we're going to stitch 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3. And then we'll leave those last 2 stitches unworked. We'll go ahead and make our chain 3. And see how we did the same here and here. We did 2 slip stitches, and we left the last 2 on this side unworked. So now what we're going to do for row 10, 11, and 12 is repeat what we did up here. Our chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, so we'll double crochet in the same stitch. We'll double crochet in each of the double crochets across, and then 2 double crochets in the last stitch. I completed row 10, and we increased by 1 double crochet at the beginning and end of this row, and so now we have 20 double crochets, and we're going to repeat this for 2 more rows. Increase at the beginning and end, and double crochets in between for 2 more rows. I completed row 11 and row 12. Row 11 you have 22 double crochets, and row 12 you have 24 double crochets. And we chained 1, and again we're going to do this similar technique. We're going to slip stitch in the first 2. Then in the next stitch we'll slip stitch, chain 3, and 2 double crochets. Then we'll place 1 double crochet in the next 18 stitches. I've stitched 1 double crochet in the next 18 stitches, and now we have the 3 stitches left. In the next stitch, I'm going to stitch 3 double crochets. 1, 2, 3. I'll go ahead and chain 3, and we can see that we have the 2 stitches that are left unworked here and the 2 stitches that are slip stitched there. And so now we have 24 double crochets for row 13. All right, row 14, we're going to go back to repeating what we did in the center of our tree. 1 double crochet in the same stitch as our double crochet, 1 double crochet in each double crochet across, and then 2 double crochets in the last stitch. We'll do this row and then repeat for 1 more row, and then our Christmas tree will be complete. So we're stitching 1 double crochet in the same stitch as our chain 3, 1 double crochet in each stitch across, 2 double crochets in the last, chain 3, and repeat. So I completed row 14 and row 15, 2 double crochets in the first stitch, 1 in each across, and 2 in the last. And so for row 14, you have 26. For row 15, you have 28 double crochets. Now, this is my second Christmas tree. I already have another one made because we're going to put 2 together. On the first one, I went ahead and weaved in the ends. And then on this one, I'm going to leave this attached because we're going to use that to stitch the 2 Christmas trees together. You do need to take a minute and go ahead and weave in the top, and on the other Christmas tree, the top and the bottom, just to get that out of your way. All right, so I stitched that to the back, and you can see how the striping yarn made several different shades, and I really, really love that. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the 2 together like this. We'll line it up. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and do a chain 1, and then I'm going to show you how to stitch the side together. So whether you're making a hot pad decoration or stuffy, you're going to stitch the 2 Christmas trees together the same way. So here's where I left my yarn attached. I'm going to go across here and then go back over there and stitch a single crochet. And that's just to get me started. Now, when you're stitching, you want to make sure everything stays lined up. You want to try to stitch in the sides of the stitches and not the holes for a much neater appearance. All right, so we'll just stitch through, stitching through the sides of those stitches, and you'll have to eyeball it. There isn't a set number of stitches, just however many looks nice on what you're doing. And we'll stitch right up into this corner. I want to make sure I put one right in that corner on both sides. All right, then we'll stitch a couple stitches there. And this brings us to our first little point. And we want to stitch 2 stitches in that point, right in there. And that's going to help it form that shape that we want. All right, so now we're just going to stitch up the side to the next point, stitching through the sides of the stitches. And again, there is not a set amount of stitches. You want to just make it look pretty. And the key is just to watch it as you go. Try not to put them too close so they bunch up, and not too far apart so you have too much spacing. There we go. Just take your time like I'm doing. And see how that's looking? I like using this lighter green on this darker green. I think it looks pretty. And again, there might be a spot where you don't have a place to put your hook and you have to go in one of those holes. It's not going to hurt anything. It's just we want to try not to do that so that it looks nice and neat. All right, so here I'm to this next point. I'm going to stitch a couple stitches in the bottom of it, the bottom of the point going to the point. And some of those are going to be in chain 3, so you're going to have to be really careful. Make sure that you get it where you want it. All right, so now I'm to the point. Go in that stitch, and we're going to stitch 2 single crochets right in the end of that point. And see how that's going to give it a much nicer appearance, that it's nice and pointed and the definition of our Christmas tree. Isn't that pretty? Now we'll continue to do this till we reach up here to the top of our tree. I've single crocheted up the side of my Christmas tree. Here's my 3 points. And now I'm to the top, and when you get to that top, we're going to chain 12. I've chained my 12 chains, and this is going to form our loop. And so what we need to do is join to that first single crochet where we started our loop with a slip stitch, and then single crochet in that same stitch. So there's our loop, so we can hang up our Christmas tree. Now we're going to work down this side, and it's a little bit different because we're going in the opposite direction. All right, so you're still going to stitch evenly single crochets down the side, trying to get in those sides of the stitches nice and neatly. And like that, it's just not always easy. You just have to take your time. Make sure you're not going too close together, not too far apart. There we go. And we're coming down to the first point here. And so now what we're going to do is in this point, we're going to stitch 2 single crochets just like we did on the other side. There we go. Now we're going to stitch in the underneath of that point. There we go. 1 and 2. And you usually get 2 in there. I did 2 over here, and you can usually get 2 in there. And then we'll just start going down to the next Christmas tree point. Let me do a couple stitches so we can look at it. There we go. All right, so it looks the same. We're just going from the other direction. We're coming down. We're putting 2 in the point, 2 underneath, because we did 2 underneath each of these, and then repeat that all the way down to the bottom point. So I stitched up, I made my loop, and I stitched down this side. At this point, if you want to make this into a stuffie, you would take your stuffing and go ahead and stuff your tree. Do keep in mind that this is double crochet stitches, and if you stitch it too tightly, your stuffing is going to show through. All right, so there's your Christmas tree stuffie. And then whether you're making a stuffie or a hot pad or a decoration, you're going to close the bottom just by stitching single crochets across. And this part is easy because we have those stitches from our last row that we can stitch in. And so we'll just stitch across, closing up our stuffie. I've stitched across the bottom. Here's my last stitch. I'm going to join to that first single crochet. Go ahead and cut my yarn. And boy, I was cutting that close, wasn't I? Alrighty, so then I'll go in the next loop, pull that loop through, and tie that off. Then we'll take our needle and weave that in. So we can make a solid hot pad or a solid stuffy, or we can jazz it up and add decorations or maybe a silly smile.